Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Pillars of Eternity with me, Bring It On.
Right.
Let's start reading some books. So typically in past Let's Plays, I'd focus only on reading what was unique, like notes and journals, but generic books I would not touch because it's hard to keep track of which books I've read and which ones I haven't, especially in CRPGs since there's so many. But I think this will be the start of something new. Book of the Hunt. My students ask to be taught the way of Galawain. I tell them they have already failed. Does one ask a deer to present itself as dinner? Of course not. One must outwit, outmaneuver, and overpower the deer if one dreams of venison. So it is with the Seeker God. To ask a question is weakness and idle indecision. To seek answers is to understand, and to become one with Galawain. Survival begins with strength from within. But I only strike my students when they ask the second stupid question. For all of us begin young and weak. It is a point fact, and not one of shame, an essential tenet to Galawain's teachings. Perseverance and cleverness are prized by Galawain above brute force, a fact my young pups often forget. It is right and proper that the strong lead the weak, and it is equally proper that the strong be continually tested until the balance changes. Galawain celebrates the strength of the victor and the prowess of the well-fed predator, but above all, the clever hound celebrates the transformative nature of strength. Galawain's greatest desire for us is that prey become predator, fueling babes grow into strong hunters, the lost find their own enlightenment. This philosophy is best exemplified by the rites of the Anamfatha of Ir Glonfoth. One of the Glonfothan spiritual leaders is old and nearing death. It is customary to enter the woods and confront Galawain's herald. If the Seeker God finds that Anamfoth's life, deeds, and soul worthy, the reward is a quick death. His soul joins Galawain's pack. If deemed unworthy, the Anamfoth is killed, soul forced to find its own way to the next life, and his memory erased from the records of the tribe. Survival begins with strength from within, and weak leaders endanger the whole pack. This is Galawain at his purest. Even at the end of life, one must struggle for worthiness, for greatness, just as one must struggle every day to feed his pack. The Seeker God is easy to understand if one actively engages in the quest for knowledge, but his secrets are self-occluding to those who merely ask, desiring knowledge without the requisite hunt. My own flesh and blood once asked me, will learning to hunt please Galawain? I told him yes, but added, Galawain would prefer that you hunt to learn. Alright, the Adir Empire, Part 1, Origin. In approximately 2200 AI, a group of tribes called the People of the Deer unified into a new civilization called the Adir Kingdom. The tribes, small and widespread over the land, knew it would be better for their continued existence to unify. The leaders of each tribe became advisors to the king, chosen by the group. Each advisor would still be lord over his people. Each lord would answer to the Fairconing, first king. This decision turned out to be exactly what was needed, and the Adiran Kingdom thrived, spreading out over the land, establishing strong trade routes, and became known to be fair but shrewd businessmen. While the country thrived and eternally there was little strife, there were still the occasional skirmishes with the neighboring elven kingdom of Kolklin. Not long after the kingdom was formed, the Adiran people began studying animancy. Still largely unknown at that time, it was an exciting, terrifying new realm that the Adiran scholars saw great potential in. This potential came to bear fruit in 2260 AI, when a group of animancers working together transferred the soul of a recently departed man into another body, creating the first of what would later come to be known as the undead. The reaction to this discovery was swift and decisive. Both the King of Adir and the Church of Wotica condemned this event, and the study or practice of animancy was outlawed. It would never again be practiced openly on Adiran soil. Conflicts with Kolklin continued, escalating into a minor war in 2398 AI. Afterward, a treaty was signed and the Kingdom of Adir merged with Kolklin to form the Adir Empire. With the political and military strife now settled, the Adir Empire would become an economic powerhouse, able to provide resources that were hard to find in other parts of the world. The trade routes became some of the most lucrative in the world. Alright, the Adir Empire Part 2, Expanding Borders. In 2602 AI, Adirian explorers returned from over the ocean, telling tales of the ruins and treasures there, and of expansive fields that were perfect for growing Vorlus. The explorers warned the Fairconing that the locals were not friendly to outsiders, but the Fairconing, seeing this as an opportunity to extend his empire and secure trade on another continent, sent more explorers. Over the next 20 years, the area that would become the Dyrwood was investigated, mapped, and colonized. In 2623, the first permanent Adirian colonial settlements were established. Vorlus fields are set up north of the forest in the Dyrwood. Between the conflicts with the Glonfothans and the War of the Broken Stone, it floundered. It wasn't until 2643 that the opportunity presented itself again. Some Eothasian pilgrims, wanting to escape persecution, established colonies and Vorlus farming operations in the territory of Riadceris. With Grand Valia on the verge of collapse, the Fairconing wanted to ensure his hold on the purple dye trade would be established. He encouraged the settlement and even paid to have the pilgrims set up in the New World. Because the Fairconing was still trying to secure his name in the purple dye trade, he was unable to properly respond to Admeth Hadrit when he issued his ultimatum. To avoid a rebellion and leave himself time to oversee the Vorlus farms in Riadceris, the Fairconing relented and made Admeth a Griff? Or Griff? Let's say Griff. Griff Palatine. Palatine. In return for his concession, Admeth spent time and resources on the Dyrwood's trade and shipping routes, benefiting the Fairconing with increased income. For 7 years, the Dyrwood provided Adir with a steady income, leaving the Fairconing time to ensure his trade system in Riadceris was strong. With the Fairconing's attention elsewhere, Admeth instituted the 10 Years' Treaties, ending slavery in the Dyrwood and permanently removing one of the revenue sources provided by the Dyrwoodan explorers, the artifacts from the ruins scattered throughout the Dyrwood. At this point, the Fairconing's word meant almost nothing to the citizens of the Dyrwood. Admeth Hadrit had replaced him as their true leader. In order to undermine Admeth's standing, the Fairconing found allies willing to explore the ruins, against the treaty conditions, and plunder them. Soon, Adir again had a supply of artifacts to sell. When his agents were eventually caught, the Fairconing distanced himself from the operation, certain there was no way to link him to the proceedings. But the Gref, using means provided to him by his Glonfothan allies, discovered the evidence needed to prove the Fairconing was behind the plunderers. The conflict that arose from this revelation led to Admeth declaring independence for the Dyrwood in 2668 AI. After a bloody 4-year-long war that resulted in the death of Admeth, the Fairconing relented. Trying to keep control of the Dyrwood had become too costly. He signed treaties with the new Duke of the Dyrwood, and returned his attention to Riadceris, redoubling efforts on the Vorlus trade, which is still running today. Who replaced Hadrit? Alright, the Midwife's Memoirs. My mother lived every note of life's song. Bringing me into this world was her last verse. For this, my father scorned me and abandoned me. For this very same fact, my town's midwife, an adherent of Hylia, or is it Helia? Helia, right? See, I don't know if all this is Adirian language or not. By the way, I'll say Helia. Raised me as her own. I guess if I'm not sure, I'll just default to the pronunciations I've learned. And when I came of age, I learned that Helia visits us on the screams of women in childbirth. When a woman dies giving life to her child, her soul is carried away, reborn as an avian attendant of Helia's court. Through the miracle of the Queen of Birds, my mother has been with me, watching over me my whole life. I wear the fetish charms of the Cloud Singer, the bird I dreamt my mother became. My feathery trinkets look gaudy and unbecoming, but it is a signifier to women in need that I am a trained midwife, blessed by Helia and living every note of life's song. The Queen of Birds wills us to shepherd new life into the world, and not, as the other gods so often desire, to end it. A follower of Magrin once mocked my faith, saying I worshipped paintbrushes and birds, tiddling things beneath the gods. I do not resent the other gods and the brutal necessities that they must oversee, but it is not language, love, the arts, and creativity that which separates us from simple beasts. Helia allows us to rise above our savage, feral selves. I'm often amused that, upon seeing our holy aviaries, visitors frequently ask, "This is nice, but where's the real temple of Helia?" Perhaps they think hallowed ground requires oppressive stoneworks and ceilings that hide the sky. They do not realize the Bird Queen stands not on ceremony. She makes herself manifest in the music of birds and in beauty of the ubiquitous open sky. Helia prefers the worship of 2 children singing over 1,000 petitioners silently praying for victory. The Sky Mother asks so little of us, and yet so much. We are charged to live every note of life's song. It surprises me how many fail to embrace this divine calling. Excerpts from the Sermon of Struggle. Choice is a luxury we earn through peace. Struggle is our fundamental nature. Even when our war banners sit idle, mankind ferment strife. Friends argue with fists, lovers kindle jealousies, merchants compete with lies. Wherever mankind goes, struggle follows. Magrin is goddess of fire and war, not bloodshed and conquest. The many raid Sirius would tell it differently. How bitter they must be that Magrin's priests were able to destroy a god made manifest. How bitter indeed. We who worship Magrin are not addled barbarians or cloistered mystics. We're soldiers, armorers, watchmen, and bodyguards. Artisans of conflict, protectors of our families and flags. We do not salivate for battle. We view war as unwelcome, but struggle is our fundamental nature. We do not pray for strife. We pray for the wisdom to resolve it quickly. We do not wish for war, but when it inevitably must be fought, we find divine ecstasy in discipline, efficiency, and excellence. Magrin, guide us to the battle that is just and fair. Let us be your fire that burns away the profane, leaving only the righteous. If struggle is our fundamental nature, let victory be our inevitable state of grace. The Erochian calendar, Erochian? Annie Erokio, the New Year. Only 150 years old, and of alien origin as well. The Erochian calendar is currently used throughout most of the Deerwood. I forgot, are 2 C's mentioned in the... before I continue, I'm going to just butcher this over and over again. Alright, it's not mentioned here. So it might be Iraqian. Anyway, the Iraqian calendar is currently used throughout most of the Deerwood and the surrounding areas. While the Deerwood was using the Adiran calendar until recently, they gave it up in favor of the Iraqian calendar. The transition was easy to get people to make, because the Adiran calendar was hopelessly inaccurate. Irokio calculated that it takes the planet approximately 334 days to orbit the sun. They took the 9 months from the Adiran calendar and broke them into 16 months of 20 days each, with each season consisting of 4 months. The length of each month corresponds to how long it takes Balafa, one of our moons, to circle the planet. At the end of each season, 3 days, not part of either season, are set aside for people to celebrate the transitions. Lastly, the final 2 days of the year, New Year and Mid-Year, are used to observe the beginning and midpoint of the year. To prevent any confusion for the transition from the old calendar to the new, Irokio kept the year the same. So although the calendar has only been in existence for 150 years, it is currently 2823 AI, Annie Irokio. Irokio gave the months Balian names, but in the Deerwood and surrounding areas, they called them by translated names. The year is broken down in the following way. New Year. Day to celebrate the arrival of the new year. Of all the holidays, this one is celebrated by most people around the Deerwood and the Valian republics. Each new year is greeted with fervent zeal to begin things anew and start with a fresh slate. Now, winter months. 2 at the beginning of the year and 2 at the end. Deep winter, Fonaverno. Late winter, Caraverno. A spring dawn, 3 days. And Prima, used to celebrate the transition of the world, rebirth, and spring. The Othasian festivals are especially prevalent at this time, or were, prior to the Saints' War. Spring months. Early spring, I assume that you roll your R's for this, right? Prima, mid-spring, Maj Prima, deep spring, Fawn Prima, late spring, Tar Prima. Summer rising, 3 days, and Estu. A period of transition from birth to growth. Many ceremonies designed to usher children into adulthood take place during summer rising. Summer months and mid-year, early summer, a Praestu. Midsummer, a Majestu. Or maybe it's Majestu. Mid-year, a reflection and introspection. The year is half over. People who made promises on New Year use mid-year to assess their progress or renew their oaths. Deep summer, Fenestu. Late summer, Terestu. Autumn falling, 3 days. Enoten, or Enoten. The harvest celebrations happen during autumn falling if the crops are particularly bountiful. If the harvest was small, supplication is given to the gods, asking for a better harvest the following year. Autumn months, early autumn is Preoten, mid-autumn, Mayoten, or Majoten, a deep autumn, Fenaten, and late autumn, Teraten, or Terauten. So I thought, isn't Amoa pronounced Amoa, or is it Amawa? This could be Terauten, Fenauten. Well, either way. A Winter Dusk, 3 days. In Averno, Winter Dusk is filled with celebrations of life and vigils for the dead. The world is returning to sleep, plants die, and those still alive raise a toast to another year. Winter months, early winter, oh boy, Pre-Averno, no, it's pre. So Pre-Averno. And then midwinter, so it is Maj. Maj Averno. Fantastic. Like the first time this word appears, or at least the pronunciation, this should have been up here somewhere. Alright. Well, let's make sure we finish everything on the right side here. We did not. Okay. Selected correspondences of Giftbringer Iden, or Eden. Seeing ocean waves of Andra's sorrow, of her unrecorded love for the unattainable moon. Sing of the ocean's sorrow, so we may forget our own. Each day, the tides reenact Andra's longing for the great moon. The waters reach out at high tide, yearning for the heavenly body, only to slump into low tide when the moon proves unattainable. You asked me once why I love Andra so dearly. I could go from a life on dry land to being a devotee of the goddess of the oceans. I sing of the ocean's sorrow, that I may forget my own. It is Andra's message that speaks to my heart. I devoted my life to helping others discard painful memories, for that is the gift Andra gave me. When I lost my young daughter, my wife and I were inconsolable until a gift bearer offered to take my toddler's toys and cast them into the deepest waters. Truth be told, I and the other gift bearers I know have never spoken to Andra. She is largely silent, and when she does speak, uses floods and tidal waves instead of words. But we sing the ocean's sorrow, so that others may forget theirs. Andra's story, the story of desire unanswered, actually matters to people like you and me. Margaret cannot steer you to victory over sadness. Helia cannot force joy down a crying throat. Only Andra can give us the strength to persevere when life seems without worth. That is the answer to your question regarding why I love my goddess so dearly. Alright, true stories from the living lands. Only the hardiest of explorers would dare to take the long, dangerous trek to the living lands. While there is no denying its beauty, the diversity of plant life alone is a herbologist's dream. The inherent risk in blithely trekking through these pristine hills is more than most should undertake. Let me take a moment to tell you about the land itself. Rolling hills, greenery, and sun. The whole area feels like a succession of hills and valleys, each with its own ecosystem. While that declaration is a tad extreme, it can almost be said to be true. A combination of sun, geographical location, proximity to fresh water, valley depth, and the existence of hot springs have given the living lands a wide breadth of flora and fauna. Walk down a hillside into a valley, you'll find lush, verdant hills. Climb the next rise, and you might see nothing but rock and boiling mineral springs. And the creatures. In my travels, I've seen it all. This place never ceases to amaze me. Trolls. I'll never forget my encounter with the trolls of the living lands. I just narrowly avoided being consumed by a giant plant. More on that later. was running as fast as I could to get away from it. I broke the crest of the hill, and the valley below was wide, green, wet, and covered with low, thick-branched trees. Vines grew everywhere. Between the trees, across the tops of them, down to the ground, it is a mess of vine and green. Cautiously, I worked my way down toward the basin, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. And it's a good thing I did so. I noticed not all the trees appeared to be trees. I froze, dropping to the ground in an effort to minimize my appearance. One of the trees moved, lumbering slowly away from the cluster. It's then that I realized it was a troll, stepping out from among the group of trees it had been resting against. A few more steps, I walked right into their home. The camouflage these trolls exhibited far exceeded any I had ever seen before. I hope to return again in the future and observe them more. Insects. While I've never seen them, I've read reports of giant insects in the living lands. Centipedes, flies, mosquitoes, and hornets all 10 times the size you would see them elsewhere. Imagine making camp. You've just gotten everything set up. There's a nice fire going next to your shelter. Something is gently simmering in the cooking pot. You sit down, finally feeling like you can relax after a trying day. Feel a tickling at your feet, insistent and prolonged. Reaching down to brush whatever it is away, the hand comes in contact with something hard, long, and flexible, finding its way around your boot. You look down to see a centipede the size of your arm casually making its way over your feet, toward the far side of your camp. You would get out of camp, wouldn't you? That's exactly what my friend did, and he realized he had started his fire over a centipede nest. Plants. Unless we forget, do not let your guard down around the plants. I discovered a wonderful collection of giant flowers. They were bright pink and grew in a circle around a central stalk. What an aroma. I lack the words to describe how delectable it was. Sweet, fruity, and light with just a hint of something tangy. Looking closer, I saw some berries growing on the stalk in the center of the flowers. Well, I just had to have them, so I started pushing my way through the flowers. Then the vines growing around the base of the plant began to twitch, and the blooms turned towards me. It was at that moment I saw the blooms weren't actually flowers, but hinged jaws. I had been fooled by its camouflage. I quickly retreated, pushing my way back out, just in time. The bloom slammed shut, but I'd still been standing there, trying in vain to reach the berries. I wouldn't be writing this book today. Alright, the enigmatic god of cold. Young students are often confused by Berith and Rimmergans. Is that right? Second R isn't rolled, right? Someone pronounced it earlier. I think the first R is rolled. Either way, a seemingly overlapping roles in holding dominion over death. Berith oversees the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Rimmergan oversees the cold, destructive act of death itself. This difference is often difficult for novices to appreciate until they've lost a loved one and endured the absence for a time. It is Berith that determines we will be reborn, just as certainly as we will die. But keep trying to put the G before the R. Rimmergand is the executioner's axe. Rimmergand shows us that all life ends in stillness. I learn all these pronunciations as I go. And he'd only show them the symbol of Rimmergand, the bone-white auric skull found carved within the most ancient of Ingwithan ruins. It is a symbol of death and doom in every culture. Any child with 4 winters under his belt needs no introduction to the ancient symbol. Rimmergand embodies not just death, but all manifestations of collapse, be they famine, plague, or simple bad luck. Rimmergand is a primal god, silent and inscrutable as death itself. He makes himself known with his passing, not by proclamation. There are innumerable stories of the god's terrifying passage through the lands of Eora. When the beast of winter stirs, bitter winds and beastly howling follow the creature's every move. Wherever the beast plants a hoof, all life withers into dust. The faithful of Rimmergand insist that even another god's life can end in stillness. They claim the other gods must flee from the beast of winter's mastery over death, but we know not if this boast holds true. But the beast of winter is shrouded in snowy clouds. Those who have seen the shaggy white monster claim that the souls of the fallen can be seen clinging, or perhaps frozen, to the beast's fur. The dwarves of the boreal south have numerous stories that tell of a similar plot. A brash hero seeks out the beast of winter to rescue the souls trapped in its fur. These tales never end well. For even if the hero saves his beloved soul, the hero dies in the process. There is not a proper tale of Remergon unless the hero's life ends in stillness. Okay, the white that wins. How long have I been wandering? I can no longer tell. The day is an endless white, the cold breath of the wilderness biting at my neck. All I feel is the insistent hand of the wind pushing me forward. Where is it taking me? Where did it start? On the boat? Was there a boat? I remember one. A storm? A disaster. If I dwell on it long enough, my mind rebels. So I walk, as she appears to me. How many times has it been? Once? Have I seen her before, or is this the first time? Did she ever leave? All my mind can do is ask questions. Each question leads to another question. The answers frighten me, so I walk. She stands with her head cast down. Long white hair hangs in front of her face, obscuring it from my view. She holds out a hand. Pale, thin, palm up. She wants my help. She wants my soul. Something screams, inhuman and primal. It overtakes me from behind, wrapping me in a terrifying blanket of sound. My skin contracts as chills course through me. I turn to face my pursuer and see only a vast white emptiness. She is gone, like every time before. Was this the first time? Has she gone before? My stomach answers with a growl. Hunger. The beast consumes me from the inside, and there's no stopping it. I must eat. I see water. Am I seeing it now? Is this a memory? Confusion slips its fingers inside my head. I murmur softly. I cannot quite hear it. I strain to no avail. The water remains. It must be here. I drop to my knees and hear the whisper-like crack of the ice beneath my knees. I'm sitting in the lee of an ice mountain. Protection it provides does little to prevent the wind from driving the pins of snow into my flesh. I am shaking. Where's my left hand? I move it. Nothing. I look down and see it moving. It is wet and caked with ice. My hand falls back against the ice. I press the edges of my memory. My brain whispers back with a soft cracking sound and a scream. Wood on wood. Tearing. Cracking. I close my eyes against the onslaught. He appears before me again. Again? Time fragments and blows around me like the snow that obscures my vision. I am walking. My hand is on fire. I feel the needles piercing my fingers as she reaches hers out to me. She raises her head, black eyes staring blankly. Her mouth opens and closes, but if she speaks, I cannot hear it. The scream again, closer this time. If I still had emotion, I would be quaking. I turn as I have so many times before, to see what monster has found me. She is there behind me. She puts her hand on my chest. The cold burns me through my clothes. She leans in. Her mouth presses against my ear. We are waiting. I open my eyes. I lie on the ground. I see torn fabric, rocks, a broken wooden box. An unsuccessful campfire. Where did it come from? Did I make it? How did I get here? I roll onto my back, unable to stand. Exhaustion sits on my chest and holds me down. She stands above me. I see frozen tears on her cheeks. She does not move. She does not threaten me. I know this is the end. Her mouth opens. The inhuman scream that erupts from within her digs through the blackness that shrouds my mind, and I see her. The wood that tore beneath her feet. The water that swallowed her. She fades, replaced by the face of the devil that has followed me. Was it always there? In my madness, did I view it in a different form? Is anything in my mind true? Time bleeds. My vision shimmers, distorting the face that approaches. Its dark eyes watch closely as it walks forward. Its fur is matted and stained. Its fangs glisten in the fading light. Its enormous hands tipped with jagged blades rise above my head. Close my eyes. I am coming. I do feel like I'm reading these a little quickly, but in my defense, there is a lot to read. And time is finite. Head down this way. Alright, 10 years of dawn. 10 years I tilled the vorless leaf. 10 years I told myself that living in Saint Widewind's footsteps would bring me rebirth. Each dawn I'd pray that if thou art in darkness, he shall bring thee light. And each yet each night would bring the same emptiness. For my decade of living as a simple dye farmer, I'll have to show for it his great deal of purple clothing. Do we not read this? I'm pretty sure we've read this before. At least something very similar. Like the actual story. Yeah, pretty sure we've read that. I think we found it in the Temple of Eothas in Gilded Vale. We've read this one as well. Alright, the many faces of Bareth. How fitting that we know the god of cycles, doorways, mortality, and inevitability as Bareth, while the Valiant know this very same god as Chirono or Chirono. For if nothing else, Bareth teaches us that duality exists in all things. There is life and death in life. Embrace this duality, and you honor Bareth. In the ruins of Irglanfath, Bareth is depicted in the form of two semi-skeletal figures, one male, one female. Bunin, I, and Q, and NQ, I, Bunin. I hope I'm saying that right. It might be E. Like Bunin, E. Literally, life and death and life in the Glanfathan tongue. Male and female, inside and outside, life and death. We often think of Bareth by imagining two sides of coin, with two end points of a journey. It is said that Bareth has the most petitioners of every god, and this is likely true. Who amongst us has not prayed for the cycle to hiccup? Who has not, in a moment of sadness, yelled at Bareth to make an exception for our fallen loved ones? Bareth may not rescue our loved ones, but it answers our prayers on its own, divine way. Bareth is the god that makes life end in death. It is also the god that makes death end in life. Bareth, Chirono, Bunin, I, Anku, or is it E? I don't know. Anku, I, Bunin. Whichever the many names you prefer to use, deserves our prayers, for has given us the promise of life's eternal renewal. I don't want to read part 2. I've read part... It's silly that it counts as stealing. I'm just trying to read, man. I think we're almost done. 2 more bookshelves. Start with this one. Alright, here's part 1. Fantastic. Alright, the Saints' War Part 1, Overthrow. There's much debate with historians as to when the Saints' War really began. It is widely accepted that the event that instigated it was the sanctuary flight of Riadsaran citizens to the Deerwood. This led to direct strife between the two nations that escalated into battle, the Saints' War. But is the author's opinion that the war truly started many years before? After the miracle of the Verdant Vorless, as it came to be known, Widewind quickly gathered followers, drawn to the stories of Eothas' miraculous prophet. His power grew. Eventually, Widewind had gained enough support that he confronted the Imperial Governor. Assisted by a collection of knights and nobles who had been swayed to his cause, he marched on the capital city. The governor was allowed to live, was forced to abdicate power and leave the colony. This was not from any understanding or easy acquiescence from the governor, because of what happened when Widewind entered the governor's palace. As Widewind approached the governor, according to accounts, his body turned into something that was no longer human. His flesh became luminescent, and his head transformed into pure, blinding light. Other accounts suggest that Widewind had become a being of light at an earlier time, when he was whipped in the public square. The outcome of his visit to the palace, however, is uncontested. The governor, knowing there was no way he could oppose an avatar of Eothas, relinquished his power. The people then asked Widewind to lead the colony. He accepted, earning him the name Divine King of Riadsaris. Widewind's rule was virtually uncontested. Initially, this was because everyone was awed that God had chosen to manifest himself and lead his people. This changed as Widewind began punishing the allies of the Old Empire and the poison on the world, what he considered corrupt churches or church leaders of Eothas. Scrutiny escalated, and soon worshippers of Eothas were also being punished for mere perceptions of heresy. Members of other religions were also added to the list of the persecuted for following different faiths. This caused large segments of the population to flee Recapture for the Deerwood, begging for sanctuary. This caused strife between the two nations. The people of the Deerwood knew that they could not sustain explosive population growth if Widewind's rule were to continue unchecked. They also feared that his eye would turn from Recapture and land on them next if nothing was done. This is exactly what ultimately happened. An open war broke out as Widewind moved to spread his dominion into the lands of Deerwood. Sorry, I'm starting to fall apart. My eyes are starting to glaze over, reading all this out loud. Okay, daily affirmations and focus of efficiency. We've read this already. Let me check my... Alright, well this should change. That's right, Alot took it. Alright, the Saints War Part 2 invasion. Widewind personally led many of the battles during the war, exhibiting extraordinary supernatural powers. He seemed virtually untouchable on the battlefield, able to burn or even disintegrate his enemies with beams of blinding white light. With a god on his side and possibly, as some said, inhabiting him, he was thought to be indestructible. It appeared that he may have been, until the Battle of Halgot Citadel. The people of the Deerwood knew they would lose the war if they could not at least slow Widewind down. Engineers, priests of Mogren, and a few others, working in secret, some say with Mogren's direct help, developed a weapon they hoped would be able to stop a god. 12 feet in diameter, it built a variety of chemical and magical explosives. The bomb was rolled under Ivan Dürer Bridge. Part of the foundation was excavated in order to allow them to embed the bomb into the bridge itself, ensuring its total concealment. 12 Deerwooden men and women volunteered to stage an ambush at the bridge to keep Widewind on it until the bomb could be detonated. The battle was short, bloody, and ultimately final. A dozen, as they came to be known, were able to delay Widewind on the bridge. The bomb detonated, killing Widewind, the 4 Deerwooden volunteers still alive at the time, and over 50 Recapture soldiers marching on the front line with Widewind. It was at that moment the Saints' War ended. Remaining Recapture forces were easy to rout, and though they had more than enough men and equipment to finish the siege, their leader, previously thought invincible, had just vanished in a rain of metal and stone. Panic set in, and the Deerwooden troops sent them away with ease. From that point on, the bomb was known by the name Godhammer. It even worked its way into everyday conversation. As sure as Godhammer ended the Saints' War, it came to be a standard phrase to express unequivocal certainty. Less certain is the fate of Eothas, who has not spoken to his followers since the explosion of the bomb, presumed by most to be dead. But some concerned citizens expressed their worry, or other more industrious think they could reproduce the result. The author would put the thoughts from your heads. Since that time, there's never been another documented explosion of such magnitude. Efforts to locate the engineers and clergy responsible for the bomb have been entirely fruitless. Godhammer was a unique, fortuitous occurrence. Its like will never be seen again without divine intervention. Sorry, needed to get a drink of coffee. Okay. Final Journal of Jonas. My son. Tomorrow I become the effigy. Tomorrow I become Skyn's embodiment on Eora. Tomorrow my master chokes on his own whip. For months, we went by secret conclave to plot our landlord's demise, all the while working the fields as if our hearts were content. Sky teaches us to plot with the mind while keeping one's face impassive, inscrutable. Fair fights are for those with armies. The quiet slave is our whetstone, our focus. In his worship, our cause finds focus, clarity, and possibility. Tomorrow, my master chokes on his own whip. By the time you read this, I will be dead. I pray Skyen does not abandon me for speaking of my plotting, but his son deserves to know why his father or how his father died. I volunteered to be the effigy. Skyen will inhabit my body, using this old farmer's simple flesh as a puppet of godly rage. I have been shaved and anointed. Tomorrow morning, I'll be your father in name only, as my manhood will be removed, my nose and ears removed, and my useless mortal eyes will be replaced with flint stones through which Skyen might see the world. My son, I'm sorry for the lies I've told you these past few seasons, but Skyen demands secrecy. Even your mother knows nothing of my furtive service to the quiet slave. Curse my name if you must, but never weep for me, for I die for the betterment of our community. Smite our Lord's corruption from the face of Eora. Tomorrow my master chokes on his own whip, for tomorrow I become the effigy. Alright, and missives of the Hand Occult. Dearest brother, or was it sister? May this letter find you in well spirits. A man of thuggish bearing stormed into my library the other day and demanded I help him find a book on the construction of an arquebus. Thought it proper service to while to steer this man toward an illuminated manuscript on the subject of whittling toy soldiers and other miniature props. Unamused by my solution, I shrugged and said, "What is an answer without a question?" He did not find my spiritual rhetoric helpful or amusing, so he punched out 2 of my teeth. I trust your summer has been less tumultuous than mine. In more important news, my apprentice claims he saw the eyeless face in a dream. She saw the eyeless face in a dream the other night. Jeez. I admit, I was so mad with envy that at first I refused to believe her. Allah forgive me for such a lapse of judgment. She described in Amawa. I'm going to change the pronunciation to Amawa instead of Amoa. I think Amoa sounds a little better. A brilliant blue hues with a featureless face, surrounded by a swarm of eyes. No 2 eyes alike. She claims Weil ignored her questions. She can't recall any specifics of what was said. In fact, my apprentice seems to have forgotten many things since before the visitation. She cannot tell me where she grew up, or what she liked to eat. At first, I was so envious of her for having seen Weil with her own eyes. It seems Weil's visit was to conceal, not to illuminate. I pray she endures this test of faith, and can look back at this event and feel the joy of mystery. What is an answer without a question? Last week, I felt the solution was ignorance. But after Weil's visit, I feel a road without length is closer to the capturing the riddle. I worry my apprentice will look back at her visit from Weil and feel cheated, robbed of some moment of clarity we all thought we were owed when we first joined. I tried to tell her she was lucky, but she was too young to understand. What is an answer without a question? May I be dead and my soul scattered to the winds before anyone knows for certain. Alright, I think we read everything. It's here, a handful here with 3 there, then 2 down here. Did I read this one? Yeah, okay. I believe I read everything. So in the next episode, we'll speak to Grimda. This is kind of a filler episode. And no, this was 100% a filler episode. But I think we all benefited from it. Except for my throat and my eyes. Beyond that, good reading. Alright, I'm going to call it here. Again, next episode we'll speak to Grimda, and we'll finish exploring Copper Lane. We have the... what's it called? Somebody's den. Admith's? I think it's Admith's den. The explorer, then we have the catacombs to deal with, so we can find the ghost of, oh, but what's his name? Dalton. Alright, but for now, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.